Sometimes the quietest knock on your door is the one that changes your entire life. That was the thought that came back to me every time I looked out my kitchen window and saw the man living next door. His name was Ethan Brooks, and for almost a year he had been nothing more than a polite wave across the driveway and an occasional smile while carrying groceries. He was the kind of neighbor everyone appreciated but hardly knew. Every morning, he walked his 7-year-old son, Noah, to the school bus before driving to work in his aging blue pickup truck. Every evening, he returned with the same calm expression, helped Noah with homework, watered the flowers lining the porch, and quietly disappeared inside before sunset. The neighborhood admired him because he never complained, never played loud music, and always offered to shovel snow from elderly neighbors' driveways during winter. I admired him because he somehow managed to carry the weight of being a single father without ever letting it show. My own life was far less organized. As a freelance graphic designer working from home, my schedule changed almost every day. Some mornings I forgot breakfast because deadlines piled up, while other afternoons I found myself taking long walks simply to clear my mind. Even though Ethan lived only a few yards away, our conversations had never lasted more than a minute. We exchanged greetings, talked about the weather, or laughed whenever Noah chased squirrels through the front yards. Nothing more. At least, that was how things remained until one rainy Thursday evening in early October. The rain had started before noon and refused to stop. Gray clouds covered the sky, making the neighborhood feel unusually quiet. I had just finished making coffee when someone knocked on my front door. I expected a delivery driver or perhaps another neighbor asking to borrow an umbrella. Instead, Ethan stood there, soaked from the rain despite wearing a dark waterproof jacket. His usually confident expression looked uncertain, almost nervous. He held one hand in his pocket while the other rested awkwardly against the doorframe. "I am sorry to bother you," he said with a small smile, "but could I ask you for a favor?" I stepped aside immediately and invited him inside. He hesitated before entering, carefully wiping his shoes on the mat as if he did not want to leave even a drop of rain on my floor. After accepting a warm towel and a cup of coffee, he looked around my living room in silence for several seconds. It felt strange seeing someone who had always seemed so composed struggling to find the right words. Finally, he took a slow breath. "Noah has a school family heritage project due next week," he explained. "He has to interview someone about family traditions and relationships. I have tried helping him, but I think he needs another perspective. Someone kind, someone patient." I blinked, surprised by the request. "You want me to help him?" Ethan nodded, though there was something deeper hiding behind his eyes, something he was clearly not ready to say. "He likes talking to you whenever he sees you outside," Ethan admitted. "He says you always smile like you have time for people. I was hoping you could spend an afternoon with us this weekend." The request sounded simple enough, yet the way he said it carried an unexpected weight. It was not merely about a homework assignment. It felt like he was opening a door he had kept locked for a very long time. I agreed without hesitation. Relief spread across his face so quickly that it caught me off guard. For the first time since I had met him, Ethan laughed softly, thanking me more than once before preparing to leave. As I watched him walk back across the rain-soaked lawn toward his house, I realized something had quietly shifted between us. I did not know why a simple school project seemed so important to him, and I certainly did not expect that accepting his invitation would lead me into the most meaningful chapter of my life. Looking back now, that rainy evening was never really about helping a little boy finish his homework. It was the beginning of two lonely neighbors discovering that sometimes the family we need most is the one we never expected to find just beyond the fence. Saturday arrived with clear blue skies, as though the heavy rain from 2 days earlier had washed every trace of sadness from the neighborhood. I carried a homemade apple pie across the lawn shortly after noon, feeling strangely nervous for what was supposed to be a simple afternoon helping a child with a school assignment. Noah answered the door before I could knock twice. "You came," he shouted, throwing the door open with the kind of excitement only children could express honestly. Ethan appeared a moment later, smiling with an ease I had not seen before. He thanked me again for coming, though this time his voice sounded lighter. Their house surprised me. It was modest but warm, filled with framed photographs, colorful drawings taped to the refrigerator, and shelves packed with children's books. Everything reflected love rather than perfection. Noah eagerly spread his school project across the dining table. The assignment asked him to interview people about what made a family strong. His first question caught me off guard. Do you think people choose their family, or does family choose them? I smiled at the thoughtful wording. Sometimes we are born into a family, I answered. And sometimes life introduces us to people who slowly become family because they care about us every day. Noah wrote down every word carefully. Ethan remained unusually quiet, listening from the kitchen while preparing grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch. Every now and then I noticed him glancing toward us with an expression that mixed gratitude and sadness. After lunch, Noah asked another question. Dad says being brave does not always mean fighting. What do you think brave means? I looked toward Ethan before answering. I think brave people wake up every morning and keep loving others even after life has hurt them. They keep showing kindness even when they are tired. Ethan paused while washing dishes. He did not turn around, but I could tell those words had reached him. Later that afternoon, Noah ran upstairs to grab colored markers, leaving Ethan and me alone in the kitchen for the first time. Silence filled the room until he finally spoke. You always know what to say, he admitted. I laughed softly. Trust me, most days I have no idea what I am doing. He smiled before becoming serious. Again, after Noah's mother passed away 4 years ago, I kept telling myself that if I worked harder, everything would become easier for him. I thought providing a good home was enough. He looked toward the staircase, making sure Noah could not hear. But lately he keeps asking questions I cannot answer alone. His honesty caught me completely by surprise. Until that moment, I had only seen the capable father everyone admired. Now I saw the exhausted man beneath the calm smile, someone carrying grief while trying not to let his son notice. You do not have to answer everything perfectly, I said quietly. Sometimes children only need to know they are not facing life alone. Ethan met my eyes for a long moment before giving the smallest nod. It felt as though an invisible wall between us had cracked just enough to let a little light through. When Noah returned, we spent another hour finishing the project together. By sunset, the assignment was complete with colorful drawings, handwritten answers, and a family tree that included not only relatives, but also people Noah called his safe circle. I noticed my own name written near the edge of the page. You put me on your family project? I asked with surprise. Noah shrugged as if it were obvious. You make Dad smile more now, he said. That sounds like family to me. Neither Ethan nor I knew how to respond. We simply looked at each other across the room, realizing that a child had quietly spoken a truth neither of us had been ready to admit. The following week settled into an unexpected rhythm that neither Ethan nor I seemed willing to interrupt. What had begun as a single afternoon helping Noah with a school project quietly became shared dinners, evening walks, and small conversations that stretched a little longer each day. On Tuesday evening, Ethan texted to ask if I wanted to join them for homemade chili. On Thursday, I invited them over for pasta after discovering Noah had declared my garlic bread the best in the neighborhood. Before long, our front doors stayed open more often than closed, and crossing the few yards between our houses started to feel less like visiting a neighbor and more like coming home. Noah seemed happiest of all. He loved inventing little traditions that included the three of us. Friday movie nights quickly became his favorite. He insisted on making popcorn himself, carefully measuring every kernel as though the recipe were a family secret. One evening, while the opening credits rolled across the television, he curled up on the couch and casually asked, "Were you two always friends?" Ethan and I exchanged amused glances. Not really, I admitted. We mostly just waved at each other. Noah frowned dramatically. That sounds boring. His answer made all of us laugh. It was remarkable how effortlessly children could simplify life. To Noah, friendship did not require years of history. It simply meant showing up. A few days later, Ethan invited me to attend Noah's elementary school heritage fair. I hesitated at first, worried I might intrude on what should have been a family event, but Ethan assured me that Noah would be disappointed if I stayed home. The school cafeteria buzzed with excited families admiring displays of photographs, recipes, and handmade posters. Noah proudly guided us toward his presentation board. There, surrounded by colorful construction paper, were the interview answers we had completed together. Near the bottom of the display, beneath the title, "People Who Make Me Feel Safe," were 3 hand-drawn figures holding hands. One represented Noah, another Ethan, and the third was unmistakably me. My chest tightened. Parents walking past smiled warmly at the drawing, assuming I had always been part of their lives. For a brief moment, I found myself wishing that assumption had been true. As we left the school, Ethan thanked me again, though this time his gratitude sounded different. "You have given Noah something I could not," he said quietly as we stood beside his truck. "Another adult he trusts completely." I shook my head. "He gave me something too." Ethan looked curious. "What is that?" I smiled toward Noah, who was chasing fallen leaves across the parking lot. "A reason to look forward to every weekend." Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched his son laughing beneath the afternoon sun before, speaking almost to himself. I forgot life could feel this peaceful. That evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Ethan invited me onto his back porch for coffee. The autumn air carried the scent of pine trees and distant fireplaces. For the first time, our conversation drifted away from parenting, work, and neighborhood life. We talked about college dreams that had changed, favorite books, embarrassing first jobs, and the places we still hope to visit someday. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Somewhere between stories and comfortable silences, I realized I had stopped thinking of Ethan as simply the quiet single father next door. I had begun seeing the thoughtful, funny, resilient man behind that quiet exterior. As I prepared to leave, Ethan walked me to the gate separating our yards. "I am glad I knocked on your door that rainy evening," he said softly. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee still in my hands. "So am I." Neither of us noticed the elderly woman across the street watching from her porch with a knowing smile, as though she had recognized long before we did that some of life's most meaningful relationships begin not with grand gestures, but with one simple act of asking for help. October slowly surrendered to November, bringing crisp mornings and trees painted in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere along the way, spending time together had stopped requiring invitations. Ethan knew he was welcome to knock on my door whenever he wanted, and I had developed the habit of walking into his kitchen with a bag of groceries whenever I planned to cook dinner. Noah joked that the invisible fence between our yards had become the shortest street in town because we crossed it so many times each week. Life felt surprisingly simple, and that simplicity was beginning to heal parts of me I had not realized were lonely. One Saturday morning, Noah's soccer team played its final game of the season. Ethan insisted I come, claiming Noah would spend the entire match searching the sidelines if I stayed home. He was right. Before the game even started, Noah waved enthusiastically from the field until he spotted both of us standing together with hot chocolate in our hands. Every time he glanced toward the stands, his smile grew a little wider. His team lost by a single goal, yet Noah celebrated as though they had won a championship because, in his words, my favorite people both came. After the game, we stopped at a small neighborhood diner for lunch. Noah chattered endlessly about impossible goals he planned to score next season, while Ethan listened with patient amusement. Watching them together, I realized how much strength Ethan had poured into raising his son. Even in moments of disappointment, Noah radiated kindness, confidence, and joy. Those qualities did not appear by accident. They reflected the man sitting across the table. On the drive home, Noah fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement. Ethan lowered the radio until only soft music filled the truck. "Thank you," he said quietly without taking his eyes off the road. "For today? For every day lately." I smiled. "I should be thanking you. I cannot remember the last time weekends felt this meaningful." Ethan laughed softly. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." His words lingered between us long after the conversation ended. That evening, as Noah slept upstairs after an unusually active day, Ethan and I remained on the back porch wrapped in blankets against the cool air. We spoke about ordinary things at first, but eventually our conversation drifted toward the future. "Have you ever thought about moving?" Ethan asked. "Not really," I answered. "Everything important to me seems to be here now." The moment the words left my mouth, I realized how true they had become. Ethan looked down into his coffee before speaking again. "After my wife died, people kept telling me time would fix everything. They meant well, but time never fixed anything. It simply became quieter." He paused before continuing. "Meeting you has been different. It has not erased the grief. It has reminded me that life can still grow around it." I searched for the right response, but found none that felt big enough. Instead, I reached over and rested my hand gently on his forearm. It was a small gesture, almost instinctive, yet neither of us pulled away. We simply sat there beneath a sky filled with early winter stars, sharing a silence that no longer felt empty. Just then, headlights swept across the front of the house. A silver SUV stopped in the driveway. Ethan's relaxed expression changed instantly. He stood, staring toward the unfamiliar vehicle with unmistakable concern. A well-dressed man stepped out, carrying an overnight bag and looking directly at the house as though he belonged there. Before I could ask who he was, Ethan exhaled slowly and murmured words that carried more weight than I expected. I was hoping he would not come back. The front doorbell rang a second later, and for the first time since that rainy afternoon had brought us together, I sensed that the peaceful life we had quietly built was about to face its first real test. The man at the front door introduced himself as Daniel Carter. He was well-dressed, confident, and carried himself with the effortless charm of someone accustomed to being welcomed wherever he went. The moment Ethan opened the door, however, it became obvious that this was not a pleasant surprise. Ethan's shoulders stiffened, and the warmth that had become so familiar over the past several weeks disappeared behind a carefully controlled expression. "I should have called first," Daniel said with a practiced smile, glancing past Ethan into the house. "I was in town for work and thought Noah deserved a visit." Ethan hesitated before stepping aside. "He is already asleep," he replied calmly. "You can see him tomorrow morning." Daniel nodded, but noticed me standing near the kitchen doorway. "I did not realize you had company," he said. Ethan answered before I could speak. "This is my neighbor, Ryan." Daniel extended his hand politely, but his curious eyes lingered a second longer than necessary. "Nice to meet you," he said. "I have heard absolutely nothing about you." The comment sounded friendly enough, yet something beneath it felt deliberate. I shook his hand and excused myself, sensing the conversation that followed was not meant for me. The next morning, Noah ran downstairs the moment he discovered Daniel in the kitchen. "Uncle Daniel," he shouted, wrapping his arms around him. The reunion was genuine, and I quickly understood why. Daniel had been Ethan's younger brother for years before becoming the uncle who visited whenever his demanding career allowed. Throughout breakfast, he entertained Noah with stories from his travels, filling the room with laughter. Even Ethan seemed more relaxed, though a quiet tension remained whenever Daniel and I happened to exchange glances. Later that afternoon, the four of us walked together through the neighborhood park while Noah raced ahead toward the playground. Daniel eventually slowed his pace until he and I walked side by side. "You have become important to them," he observed casually. "I hope so," I answered. "They have become important to me too." Daniel smiled, though it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. "Just be careful," he said. "Ethan has spent years rebuilding his life. He protects his heart more than anyone I know." His words stayed with me long after our conversation ended. That evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Daniel joined Ethan and me on the back porch. The conversation drifted toward old family memories, college years, and the difficult months following Ethan's loss. Listening quietly, I learned details Ethan had never shared before. How Daniel had temporarily moved in to help with Noah after the funeral. How Ethan had nearly sold the house because every room reminded him of the past. And how Noah had ultimately convinced him to stay by saying, "Mom would still know where to find us here." The story left all three of us silent. After a while, Daniel stood and stretched. "I think I finally understand why Noah keeps talking about the neighbor next door," he said with a warm smile directed toward me. "You make this house feel alive again." Ethan looked away, almost embarrassed by the comment, while I felt my face grow warm. Before heading inside, Daniel paused beside his brother. "You spent years surviving," he said quietly enough that only Ethan and I could hear. "Do not confuse surviving with living." The next morning, Daniel packed his overnight bag and prepared to leave. Before climbing into his SUV, he pulled me aside. "Take care of them," he said. Sincerely, not because they need rescuing, because sometimes even the strongest people forget they deserve happiness. As he drove away, I watched Ethan standing beside Noah in the driveway, both waving until the vehicle disappeared around the corner. Ethan caught my eye across the lawn and smiled, the guarded expression from 2 nights earlier finally gone. In that moment, I realized Daniel had not arrived to create distance between us. Without intending to, He had quietly given both of us permission to imagine a future neither of us had been brave enough to consider. Daniel's visit left behind more than a quiet weekend. It changed something subtle between Ethan and me, as if his words had given us permission to stop pretending that our growing closeness was merely neighborly kindness. We still moved carefully around the unspoken feelings that lingered between us, but the distance that had once existed was almost gone. The following Friday, Noah burst through my front door after school carrying a colorful flyer. "The Winter Lights Festival is next weekend," he announced excitedly. "Everyone goes. There are food trucks, music, ice sculptures, and fireworks. Dad promised we would go if you came too." I looked toward Ethan, who had followed him inside carrying their backpacks. He smiled sheepishly. "He has been planning this all week." I laughed. "Then I guess I do not have much of a choice." Noah pumped his fist in celebration before racing upstairs to show my old board games the same enthusiasm he showed everything else. The festival arrived beneath a clear December sky. The town square glowed with thousands of tiny white lights wrapped around every tree, while holiday music drifted through the chilly evening air. Families wandered from booth to booth carrying hot chocolate and roasted nuts, their laughter blending with the sound of children skating on the temporary ice rink. Noah insisted we try everything. We sampled homemade cookies, admired hand-carved ice sculptures, and even joined a charity raffle that Noah confidently declared we would win. We did not, but his optimism never faded. At one point, he spotted a giant illuminated snow globe people could step inside for photographs. "Come on," he shouted, grabbing both Ethan's hand and mine before pulling us toward it. The photographer smiled warmly as we stood together beneath swirling artificial snow. "Family photo?" she asked automatically. Ethan and I exchanged a brief glance. Before either of us could answer, Noah beamed. "Yes, please." Neither of us corrected him. The camera flashed several times, capturing smiles that felt completely natural. When the printed photo emerged a few minutes later, Noah hugged it against his chest as though it were something priceless. "This one is going on the refrigerator," he declared proudly. Ethan quietly purchased an extra copy without saying why. As evening settled over the festival, fireworks were announced. The crowd gathered along the riverbank while Noah sat on Ethan's shoulders to see above everyone else. Bright colors exploded across the winter sky, reflecting beautifully on the calm water below. Without thinking, my hand brushed against Ethan's. This time, neither of us moved away. Instead, our fingers rested lightly together, almost hidden between our coats. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was quiet, careful, and unexpectedly comforting. When the final firework faded, Noah leaned down from Ethan's shoulders with sleepy eyes. "Best night ever," he whispered. The drive home was peaceful. Noah fell asleep before we reached the neighborhood, clutching the festival photograph in his lap. Ethan carried him gently inside and tucked him into bed before returning to the front porch, where I was waiting beneath the soft glow of the porch light. For a while, we simply stood together listening to the distant sound of wind moving through the bare trees. Finally, Ethan spoke. Daniel was right. I turned toward him. "About what?" He took a slow breath. "About surviving not being the same as living." He looked directly into my eyes, his usual hesitation replaced by quiet honesty. For years, I thought opening my heart again would somehow mean leaving part of my past behind. But lately I have realized something different. Loving the people still in my life does not diminish the love I will always have for the person I lost. My heart pounded as I listened. Before I could answer, Ethan stepped a little closer. "I do not know where this is leading," he admitted. "I only know that these past few months have been the happiest Noah and I have felt in a very long time." I smiled, feeling every trace of uncertainty slowly melt away. They have been the happiest months of my life, too. Neither of us rushed the moment. We simply stood together beneath the winter stars, realizing that sometimes the most important love stories do not begin with a confession. They begin when two people finally stop running from the possibility of happiness. The days following the Winter Lights Festival felt different in the quietest, most beautiful way. Nothing dramatic had changed on the surface. Ethan still walked Noah to the school bus every morning. I still worked from my home office while pretending not to glance through the window every time I heard Ethan's truck pull into the driveway. Yet beneath those familiar routines, something had settled peacefully between us. We no longer questioned whether we belonged in one another's lives. The only question left was what shape that future might take. A week before Christmas, Noah's teacher announced that every student would participate in a holiday performance at the elementary school. Noah was thrilled but also unusually nervous because he had been chosen to narrate the opening of the program. "What if I forget my lines?" he asked during dinner one evening. Ethan smiled encouragingly. "You have been practicing every day." Noah looked at me instead. "Will you both be there?" The hopeful expression on his face made the answer easy. We would not miss it, I promised. On the night of the performance, the school auditorium overflowed with proud families. Parents filled every seat while children peeked excitedly from behind the stage curtain. Ethan and I sat together near the front. When Noah walked confidently to the microphone, I noticed his hands trembling ever so slightly. Then his eyes searched the audience until they found us. Ethan smiled reassuringly, and I gave him a small thumbs up. Almost instantly, Noah relaxed. He delivered every word clearly, earning warm applause before the choir began singing holiday songs. Watching him beam beneath the stage lights, I realized how much he had grown over the past few months. He no longer carried the quiet uncertainty I had first noticed after meeting him. He laughed more freely. He spoke with confidence. Most importantly, he looked secure, surrounded by people who loved him. After the concert, families gathered in the decorated gymnasium for cookies and hot chocolate. Several parents introduced themselves to me, naturally assuming I was part of Ethan and Noah's family. At first I felt awkward correcting no one, but Ethan never seemed uncomfortable. In fact, every time someone included me in conversations about Noah's progress or complimented what a wonderful child he was, Ethan looked quietly pleased. As we prepared to leave, Noah ran ahead to help his teacher carry folded chairs back into storage. That brief moment alone in the hallway felt strangely significant. Ethan turned toward me with a thoughtful smile. "You know," he said softly, "a few months ago, I would have spent tonight standing by myself against the wall, hoping Noah felt supported enough." He looked into the busy gym where our friends and neighbors laughed together. Instead, I got to share it with someone who celebrated every little moment beside me. I reached for his hand without thinking. This time, there was no hesitation from either of us. Our fingers intertwined naturally, as though they had always belonged that way. Ethan looked down at our joined hands before meeting my eyes again. "Ryan," he said quietly, "I have spent weeks trying to find the perfect moment to tell you something." My heart skipped. He took a slow breath. "I care about you far more than I ever expected. Not because you helped Noah with the school project. Not because you have become my closest friend. I care about you because every day with you reminds me that happiness is not something I left behind. It is something I found again." Emotion caught in my throat before I finally answered. "I fell in love with both of you long before I realized that was what was happening." Ethan's eyes softened with relief, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. We simply smiled, surrounded by the joyful sounds of families celebrating around us. When Noah returned, carrying a paper snowflake he had made in art class, he immediately noticed our hands. He looked from Ethan to me before breaking into the brightest grin I had ever seen. Without saying a word, he slipped his small hand between ours as we walked out of the school together into the crisp December night. Three people taking the first steps toward a future that finally felt complete. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in fresh snow, transforming our quiet neighborhood into something that looked as though it had stepped out of one of Noah's favorite storybooks. The rooftops shimmered beneath the early sunlight, and every front yard sparkled with delicate white blankets untouched except for the footprints of children rushing outside to discover what the holiday had brought. For the first time in years, I woke before my alarm, not because of work or responsibility, but because I genuinely had somewhere I wanted to be. I carried a small stack of wrapped presents across the familiar path between our houses, smiling as I noticed tiny boot prints leading from Ethan's porch to the mailbox. Before I could knock, the front door burst open. "Merry Christmas," Noah shouted, nearly knocking me over with an enthusiastic hug. Behind him, Ethan laughed quietly, holding a mug of coffee in one hand and wearing the comfortable sweater Noah had proudly picked out for him a week earlier. "You were supposed to let me answer the door," Ethan teased. Noah shrugged with a grin. I knew it was Ryan. Inside, the living room glowed with soft lights from the Christmas tree. Stockings hung above the fireplace, and holiday music played gently in the background while cinnamon rolls baked in the oven. Everything felt warm, peaceful, and wonderfully ordinary. We spent the morning opening gifts one at a time because Noah insisted everyone deserved their own moment of excitement. He squealed over a new soccer ball, laughed at the matching scarves Ethan and I had secretly bought for each other, and proudly presented us with handmade ornaments from school. Mine was shaped like a small house with the words, "Best Neighbor Ever," carefully painted across the front in slightly crooked letters. Ethan's ornament read, "Best Dad." I noticed Noah watching us anxiously, hoping we liked his gifts. "These are perfect," I said honestly. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "I think these might be my favorite presents this year." After breakfast, we bundled into warm coats and walked through the neighborhood, delivering homemade cookies to several elderly neighbors who had always been kind to Noah. Watching Ethan help Mrs. Henderson carry groceries inside, while Noah carefully handed out decorated cookie tins, reminded me that kindness had always been at the heart of this family. It was never about grand gestures. It lived in small moments repeated every day. That afternoon, after Noah settled in the living room to build an impossibly complicated model train set, Ethan invited me onto the back porch. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the cold air, settling on the wooden railing around us. Neither of us spoke immediately. We simply admired the quiet beauty of the afternoon. Finally, Ethan reached into his coat pocket and removed the extra festival photograph he had quietly purchased weeks earlier. He had placed it inside a simple wooden frame. The three of us stood smiling beneath the glowing lights, Noah proudly holding both of our hands. "I kept meaning to give this to you," Ethan said softly. I realized something when I looked at it. I traced my fingers lightly across the frame. "What is that?" He smiled, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "Every family picture I have from the last 4 years felt like something was missing, even though I could never explain what. Then we took this one." He looked directly at me. For the first time since everything changed, it finally felt complete. My heart tightened with emotion. I had imagined hearing words like those countless times, yet nothing prepared me for how deeply they would touch me. Before I could answer, the back door opened. Noah stepped outside holding 3 steaming mugs of hot chocolate with extraordinary concentration. "I made these almost by myself," he announced proudly, "and I think family hot chocolate tastes better outside." Ethan and I laughed as we accepted our mugs. Noah stood between us, naturally slipping one hand into mine and the other into Ethan's. Looking down at the child smiling up at us beneath gently falling snow, I realized that love rarely arrives all at once. Sometimes it grows quietly through shared dinners, school projects, holiday traditions, and ordinary mornings until one day you look around and discover that the life you once dreamed about has already become your reality. New Year's Eve arrived with a quiet confidence that seemed to mirror the journey we had all taken together. Just a few months earlier, the three of us had been connected only by chance, separated by an ordinary fence and lives moving in quiet isolation. Now, that same fence had become little more than a decoration between 2 homes that felt like one. The neighborhood gathered in the community park for its annual celebration, complete with music, food, and a countdown beneath a sky waiting to welcome another year. Noah raced ahead with several friends from school, proudly wearing the matching scarf Ethan and I had given him for Christmas. Every few minutes, he looked back to make sure we were still together. We always were. As the evening unfolded, neighbors stopped to greet us. Mrs. Henderson smiled warmly before patting Ethan's shoulder. "It is good to see all 3 of you together," she said. "This street has felt brighter ever since your doors started staying open." Ethan laughed softly, thanking her, while I realized she had quietly witnessed our story from the very beginning. Later, Noah disappeared into a craft tent where children decorated small paper lanterns with wishes for the new year. When he returned, he carried 3 lanterns instead of 1. "Everyone gets to write 1 wish," he explained. "Then we hang them together." Ethan wrote first before folding his paper so no one could read it. I did the same, smiling as Noah concentrated with his tongue slightly sticking out, determined to spell every word correctly. We tied the lanterns side by side along a wooden display where hundreds of families had placed their own hopes for the future. Noah looked up proudly. "Now they stay together," he said. His words carried a simple truth that neither Ethan nor I could have expressed more beautifully. As the final countdown approached, people gathered beneath strings of glowing lights. 10, 9, 8, The crowd counted together while children laughed and couples wrapped blankets around one another against the cold. Ethan turned toward me before the final numbers faded. "There is something I have wanted to ask you," he said quietly. My heart immediately began racing. He reached into his coat pocket and removed a small silver key attached to a simple wooden keychain shaped like a little house. "This is a spare key to our front door," he said. "Not because I expect you to fix things around the house or feed the dog we do not have." His smile made me laugh through my emotions. "I want you to have it because I never want you to wonder whether you belong there. I hope one day you stop thinking of it as my house and Noah's house." He took a slow breath. "I hope it becomes our home." Before I could answer, the crowd shouted, 3, 2, 1. Fireworks burst overhead, filling the night with brilliant colors that reflected in Ethan's eyes. I closed my fingers around the key before pulling him into a warm embrace. "Yes," I whispered. "I would love nothing more." When we stepped apart, Noah was standing beside us with the biggest smile imaginable. "I knew you were going to say yes," he declared proudly, "because families always stay together." Ethan laughed and lifted Noah into a hug before reaching for my hand. The three of us stood beneath the fireworks, surrounded by neighbors who had unknowingly watched our story unfold from quiet greetings across a driveway to the beginning of something lasting. Looking back, it was never the school project, the festival, or even that rainy evening that truly changed our lives. It was one simple act of courage. A quiet single dad had knocked on the door next door and asked for help. Neither of us realized then that we were not asking for a favor. We were opening the door to a family built not by circumstance, but by kindness, trust, and the quiet decision to choose one another every single day. And as the first moments of the new year began, I knew with complete certainty that the best chapters of our story were still waiting to be written.